Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 1 Episode 10, No Small Parts, which is the season finale of Season 1 of Star Trek Lower Decks. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Lower Decks up to the end of Season 1 Episode 10. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, I've heard nothing but good things about this episode. It's the highest episode on IMDb at the moment, although that could be because it just aired. My opinion on it is, I liked it. I thought it was good. It wasn't my favorite episode of the season. I still definitely prefer last week's episode. The thing is, there's a lot of stuff about this episode I found exciting. I thought it was an interesting story. Comedy maybe wasn't the best of the season, but it was still good. It still worked. The character stories were decent. Like they advanced some of the characters, like Bulmore and Captain Freeman and Ensign Mariner's relationship. And it was It was they had some really great cameos that I'm sure a lot of people are going really crazy over, which I actually really enjoyed too. But I feel like this episode was going back to sort of episode 1 and 2 in terms of the fast and jarring pacing and how it moved maybe a bit too quickly, and that they were trying to do too much in this episode, that they packed a lot into this episode. And so some of the scenes I feel like where the plot takes us wasn't as earned, or I wasn't as invested in it, because I feel like it all just happened really fast and it was really juddery. It had that really fast cocaine type pacing that the first couple episodes were, unlike like last week's episode or like the Moist Vessa episode, which had a really steady, good pace. I feel like this was kind of a regression in terms of pacing, how it was going like, but I did really enjoy this episode. There was a lot of things I did like about this episode. So let's start with the beginning, where they visit Landru, the whole planet from the episode Return of the Archons from the original series, which I thought was It was a funny callback, and I like how these people just regressed and went back to following Landru, and she's like, "What was your problem? Why are you following Landru?" And Landru was like, "You destroy these humans, these visitors," and she was like, "Shut up, Landru! I'm gonna logic flaw you into oblivion." It's like, "Oh, Landru is apologizing." that was really funny. And then of course, like, they mentioned how one of the people was like, "Oh, I can't wait to purge people in the Red Hour." It's like, yeah, Red Hour is not even a thing anymore. It's like, "Oh, don't get me down," like, because that episode was like, and I think they call it like festival, where everyone's like festival, and it was basically the purge, because it's funny because this came, of course, from the original series, came out in the 60s, but it's like pretty much makes the premise for the Purge movies, or at least when the Purge movies came out, that's what I thought of. I thought of that episode, Return of the Archons. But anyway, it's interesting what they're doing here, and it becomes sort of a theme of the episode, and I think it might be a driving theme going forward into season 2, which I think is actually a pretty interesting theme, is that how it's kind of, in a meta way, it's kind of mocking the whole episodic nature of Star Trek, particularly the original series, maybe Next Generation a bit, how they just go from adventure to adventure, and they even talked about it a bit, how the Kirk and Spock days, how they would just find so many new places and just go on and never sort of revisit. Oh yeah, definitely Next Generation as well, because that will feed into the plot later in the episode. So that is an interesting, I kind of like that, actually. I like that it's jabbing at episodic nature of television, because a lot of people have been complaining about Discovery and Picard. Oh, the serialized Star Trek shouldn't be serialized, which I think is utter nonsense. Like Deep Space Nine was serialized, Enterprise was serialized, Voyager should have been serialized. It would have been much better if it was. So I actually think Star Trek should be serialized in general, at least to an extent. And I think that it is a flaw in the original series and Next Generation. It's just a sign of the times that they were made in, that they're not serialized, and I think both those shows would have been better if they were. So I like that it's poking fun at episodic. Like, they just solve the day and they move on. They never actually go back and visit them again and see and check up on them, and they regress, and they got worse because the Federation just like, oh yeah, we're done with them, we're moving on. I love how they made that a thing, because that is definitely meta commentary against the nature of this episodic storytelling. And of course that comes into play later with the Packlids as well, because they never checked up on the Packlids, and they ended up becoming like really powerful and started attacking Starfleet ships. So I do get the impression that that's going to be a theme going into season 2, and so that their whole deal might be to visit all these other aliens that we've seen before in previous Star Trek episodes or series, which I think would be fucking amazing. I think that would be a great premise for a season 2, where we check up on all these aliens that like Kirk or Picard, or even maybe Cisco, not so much Janeway because they can't get a Delta Quadrant, but maybe Archer visited before, and check up on them and see what's up with them and what they've been up to since. I think that's an amazing idea, and it does sound like sort of Freeman and Mariner kind of teaming up to sort of subvert like the typical Federation thinking, because they can see clearly that it's just not working. I did like how they had that joke where Ransom was like, oh yeah, it's weird visiting these TOS era planets, and they're like, what TOS? It's like, those old scientists. That was a great joke. And when I first heard TOS, I didn't even think about it because I hear that term so much, but then like a millisecond later it occurred to me, wait a second, TOS means the original series. How would Ransom know that? But then of course they make a joke about it, which I love that. I thought that was great. But then you got Bulmer sort of starting to misbehave and do what Mariner does, and she's like surprised by it, but then he reveals it's because he knows that Captain Freeman is her mother, and so he's kind of sucking up to her because of that. And you get this really sitcom trope, which I didn't bother me too much, but I didn't think it was all that great either, because it's such a tired trope where someone is revealing all these deep dark secrets when everyone's listening, and they're completely oblivious to the fact that everyone's listening to them. That is such a sitcom trope. So I wasn't huge on it, but it didn't bother me too much, because I did actually think it was really funny when Bulmer was going crazy. Does she give you Captain Mommy kisses? And they beam him aboard, and he's like, ah! Like, that was hilarious. I did love that. And it was a bit silly after that, where everyone was sort of sucking up to Mariner all the time, even Ransom. So I guess I was wrong. Absolutely no one knew about this, which is, I'm surprised. I'll have to go back and watch the show, because I've heard so many people who could have sworn that everyone knew this, but apparently no one did. So whatever. But I don't mind that. That's fine. So, and then you have the thing where the exocomp comes on board. Now, I did like the callback to the exocomp. That's one of my favorite episodes. It's an underrated episode, in my opinion, to introduce the exocomps. Of course, in that episode, they didn't like talk. They just beeped and they communicated like through a pad or whatever. But they were deemed sentient life forms. So it kind of makes sense that they made sort of advancements to the program that allowed them to speak and actually to join Starfleet as well. And I thought that was cool. I think, but most of the story between like Tendi, I'm just not a huge fan of Tendi and that kind of humor, like where she goes like, what was it, Peanut Hamper, I think the name was. She's like, I love it. Like, I don't know. I don't really get that humor. But I did. So most of their storyline, especially when she was like, when the exocomp was like fucking up and shit, and Tendi was trying to help her, I was like, yeah, I didn't really care that much about it either way. But I did think it was really funny when they had this solution to their problem where they could beam the exocomp on board. Like, if only we had someone who could survive in the vacuum of space and who could teleport, transport this virus through their and they were describing the exocomp to a T, and the exocomp's like, yeah, nah, I'm going to pass on that. Have fun having your organics being scrambled or whatever, and she just beamed away. Like, I thought that was hilarious because that was really subverting the trope or the expectation that always, because that happens so much in Star Trek where they need someone who's like not human or whatever, and the character there just so happens to fit everything perfectly, be it Data or Odo, or sometimes even Spock did that a lot in the original series. They just happen to have like their alien uniqueness just made them perfect for the situation where no other human could survive it. And I love it how they like exaggerate just how perfect this exocomp was for it. And she was like, nah, I'll pass on that. I'm just joining Starfleet because to piss off my father. Like, exocomps have fathers? That's interesting. But anyway, I love exocomps, by the way. Just throwing that out there. I don't know if this one was as cool as the one to the Next Generation, but because this one actually talks and it's a bit annoying, I like the ones that just go beep, beep. But anyway, I didn't like its inclusion here. So, you get into the whole plot about the Packlids taking over, destroying the other Starfleet ship, and they're like trying to show the Cerritos. It was a bit humorous how they kept calling it Enterprise, or another Enterprise. That was kind of funny, but I don't know, Packlids is kind of not a species I really need to see again. If I'm being honest, the episode they were in was not that good. We have seen like random Packlids in the background. They've been mentioned before. So it's not like we had no idea what they've been up to, but I guess... it is kind of in their character too, because their whole point was because they had like Romulan cloaking device and Romulan weapons, and they stole weapons and technology from tons of different alien species. So this is kind of in line that they've been collecting all this all along. They came up with these huge, powerful warships. My question is, those little claws that attach itself to the nacelles that destroyed the ship, like, wouldn't the shields like repel those claws? I think they would. I think the shields work on matter as well as energy, because it's I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe the more technical Star Trek geeks will tell me I'm wrong, but I don't know. It just seemed kind of off to me that the Packlids were able to destroy the ships that easily. But whatever. It was a pretty exciting storyline, and of course they sort of fitted in that Mariner's contraband saved the day, which is a kind of lower decks thing to have. But all right, I'll get into my biggest problem with this episode. Shax, I believe his name is Lieutenant Shax. This is not a good death. And I actually think it's funny that later in the episode they name dropped Armis. Like, I think Mariner was pissed off at Bulmer for transferring, and she said something, I'll Armis your ass, or something like that. Because this kind of reminded me of a Tasha Yar death, the Armis death. It was just, it wasn't good. And in fact, this reminded me a lot more like the Data's death in Nemesis, which clearly was not good. It was just boom out of nowhere. So first of all, like, I wasn't expecting a main character death in this finale, I'll be honest. And secondly, we barely knew this character, so it's almost similar to like a what was her name, Miriam death from Discovery, but at least they didn't like have a 15-minute long funeral for this character we barely knew. They just had, but it was almost worse because they had like a 3-second funeral, It's like, so why even kill off this character? Because the death was so, like, it didn't really affect any of the characters. It wasn't emotional for the audience at all because we barely knew this character and it happened so damn fast. It kind of pissed me off, to be honest, because this was an interesting character. One I liked how he said, "Come on, let me fire phasers." Like, this is a cool character. And they kill him off, now we don't have him, and his death wasn't really worth it. It didn't really affect anything. It didn't drive the characters. Now, maybe this will change in season 2. Maybe they'll have like a resurrection storyline, kind of making fun of the search for Spock or Colbert or whatever, which I admit would be funny. So they did something like that. But so they could redeem this in season 2. But it seemed just really pointless and unnecessary. It didn't help the plot. It wasn't emotional. It just happened all too fast. As I said, everything in this episode was boom, 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 boom. Everything in this episode happened too fast. So, yeah, I just really didn't like it. And plus, I don't like Badgie. I know a lot of people, apparently, when that episode he was in reviewed, it was like, "Oh, I love Badgie. I hope to see this character again." I was like, please don't bring this character back. But they did. And I think it's stupid. I like the concept of making fun of Clippy from Microsoft. I think it was funny. But I think they took it too far where it's like, "Oh, I'm going to kill you," kind of thing. And then it becomes too cliche. A cliche holodeck character trying to kill everyone in revenge. That's just something done before, and it's not very interesting. Just because they make it a Badgie thing that's silly doesn't make it funny. It doesn't make it any better, in my opinion. And the whole thing, like, "Oh, if you turn the safety protocols off, I'll help you." It's like, he's gonna try to. He's like, "You're not gonna try to kill me again, are you?" I'm like, of course he is. It's just, I thought that was dumb. And then we have Rutherford. His whole plot this episode about like switching modes, where he's like in cowboy mode or whatever. I didn't find that humorous. Like, I didn't hate it. It didn't annoy me or anything. It was just, I didn't find it the least bit funny. And then Rutherford loses his memory, which I suppose could be interesting. I'll remain open-minded about that one. I did find it a bit interesting. Again, Tendi is a weird character. How she always like feels like she's gonna be really upset and pissed off. Instead, like she's like, "Oh, so amazing! That means we get to be friends all over again." Like, I don't know. That's a weird quirk to have. But anyway, so yeah, that's fine. I don't really care about that either way. All right, let's talk about the Riker of it all. I was hoping for a Riker appearance earlier in the season, so it's great that we got one now, and I was really happy to see him. I thought this was a great cameo. And I love, they kind of name dropped the Titan earlier in the episode. They name dropped the Titan like a lot during the season too, but they name dropped it specifically in this episode, so I was kind of in the back of my mind that the Titan was going to show up and save the day, so I wasn't too shocked when it happened, but it was still really great to see. Riker seemed a bit out of character to me. He seemed a bit more like Ransom and more like a caricature of a lot of people think Riker is, but not how he really is. In fact, Jonathan Frakes, and we know this is Jonathan Frakes, his voice acting seemed different. And it's not that he's older, because I saw him in Picard and he seemed the same there. And his voice seemed very similar to what I recognized. Here, it just seemed like the lines didn't really fit with the Riker we know, and he was just a bit too, like, rambunctious in the whole about the contraband, like he's the one who taught Mariner all the contraband and whatnot. Like, he was never that bad into contraband, so I don't know. Troy, although I would say fit perfectly. Like, her voice acting, I thought was instantly recognizable as Troy, in the way that she talked sounded exactly like Troy. So I actually thought that worked better. That's just me. Yeah, and it was a bit silly how she was like, Riker was like, "I taught Freeman everything I know. We were the Chadish," which is the callback to a line earlier in the season. And how he was also really buddy-buddy with Mariner. It was like, "No, you owe me one," or whatever, which, I don't know. I just wasn't a huge fan of that. Although, I will say the one joke I really, really appreciated that I really liked was making fun of the Enterprise finale, where it's like, oh, I was just in the holodeck with the Enterprise, you know, the first one, the Archer. That was been a long road they had getting from there to here. I love any joke that makes fun of that theme song. Now, I'm sure people who like the theme song thought, oh, it's an homage to this great theme song. I think it's like making fun of how fucking horrible it is, but that's just me, my interpretation. Maybe that's not their intention. But every time anyone says something like that, I was like, yeah, that's how horrible that fucking theme song is. So I actually love that line. I thought that was hilarious. I think it was making fun of, because everyone agrees, although I don't even think it's that bad, but everyone agrees that the finale of Enterprise when Riker was in the holodeck was awful, so they kind of made fun of it there casually. That was a great joke. I did very much appreciate that. But yeah, so Bulmer transferred over to the Titan, which is kind of our cliffhanger. I thought they were going to do something huge to mock and make fun of the stereotypical Star Trek cliffhanger, but instead they kind of had like a serious one. Now, here's the thing about that, and I actually thought it was kind of cute at the end where Mariner kept, and it was actually an interesting turn and phrase, because throughout the episode, Bulmer was worried that Mariner would transfer and they'd lose each other, but then Bulmer goes ahead and transfers as soon as Riker's like, oh, I heard you did a good job, and he's like, thank you, Captain Riker, sir. Like, it shows how quickly he's willing to throw away his friendship with Mariner just for a promotion. And that was kind of an interesting turn of phrase in how he was like, oh, she'll get over it. But here's the thing. This is kind of our cliffhanger for Season 2. And if we get into Season 2, and it's resolved by Bulmer realizes that the promotion wasn't worth the friendship, and so he purposely gets himself demoted so he can transfer back to the Cerritos and be with Mariner again. I'm going to hate that, because that will be the most predictable thing in the world. So if that's what they're building up to, then I'm not going to be happy. Because that's so cliche and so predictable. So I hope they go a different route than that personally. I hope they just don't be too freaking obvious with it. But anyway, my rating for No Small Parts out of 10 is an 8, extremely good. 8 is a decent rating. Again, I did really like this episode. I thought it was good, entertaining, a lot of callbacks. That I love the whole long road, great joke, and bringing back like the Landrew and the Packlets and all that was really good stuff. And a lot of jokes along the way, but the character stuff I don't think to me didn't work as well. As I said, it was too boom, 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 boom. There's too much of a fast pace. I didn't think the Rutherford storyline was funny. I didn't think the exocomp. I love the exocomp, but I just didn't think it was all that funny either. I don't like seeing Badgie again, and Shax's death was just so just unnecessary. It's like, why would you do this? It just seems like it was a waste of a good character, honestly. I wonder if it's because the voice actor wanted to leave, just like, Denise Crosby wanted to leave, which is why they brought up Amherst. I don't know. But anyway, that's it for my rating, or my review, of No Small Parts. That is it for Lower Decks. So next week is Discovery. But I will be doing a full-length review of Star Trek Lower Decks next week as well. I will be doing a live discussion of Star Trek Lower Decks with my sister Alyssa and Don Willie. We have yet to set a date for that. It will be sometime next week, hopefully, as well. So just keep an eye out for my channel for that. Once we have a link, I'll put it in the description below of this video. So, yeah. And, of course, I'll start reviewing Discovery next week as well. So, a lot of exciting things happen. So be sure to check out my channel for all that. And I do many more reviews, as well as on other shows like The Expanse, The Boys, BoJack Horseman, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. And thanks a lot for watching.